and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always, here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go for a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. This episode, we'll be going over a few bits and bobs, multiple different things. We're going to be talking about Classic, we're going to be talking about Season of Discovery, the Warvin's launch and how it can potentially affect them sort of branches of WoW. I'll call them a branch of WoW, and as well as sort of just passive things that are in the Warvin that kind of annoy me a little bit. And we're going to be introducing a new segment, hopefully one that is going to be somewhat likable within the podcast, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So the weekly news is that we have new world bosses up, new bonus events, new brawls, that kind of... Sorry, I've forgotten what they all were for a bit because we haven't had them for a while. So, I'm going to completely butcher this name, but we have Shirai, Atrocity of the Undersea, as your world boss for the week. This is located within the northern part of Hollowfall. We have Burning Crusade Time Walking. This is where you can do the Burning Crusade dungeons. A lot of them are quite overtuned. Some of them are undertuned. You're looking at Ramparts, Shattered Halls, which are a little bit overtuned, and then stuff like Slave Pens that are undertuned. So please be aware, stuff will hit hard in certain dungeons, and stuff won't. Okay? This is also good for getting reputations, mounts, etc. Cooking Impossible is your brawl for the week. This is essentially where you bring cooking ingredients to your alliance factions or your faction's pot, and essentially you need to make a stew with it all. You need 15 ingredients. You can steal the other ingredients by killing the horde members that are transporting their ingredients to their cooking pot. Very simple, very fun. It's quite a good battleground, I'm not going to lie. I would deem it better than maybe the latest battleground. That's my honest take on it. And we have fortifying, entangling, and bolstering as your mythic affixes for the week. Entangling, if you stand still for too long, you're just going to get slowed and then rooted and stuff. So keep moving every now and again. Bolstering, when a mob dies, it will simply shout, giving the other mobs around it increased damage and health, kill everything at the same time, or make sure that they, aren't essentially in a big group and bolstering themselves 200 extra % and damage, that kind of thing. Very simple, but very easy. Now, I'm going to start off with stuff that kind of annoys me within the Warvin, and it's something that I've been noticing a lot more throughout games, or throughout the expansions, I should say, and this is passive damage and healing. Okay, I play a Druid. I play a Boomkin. I sometimes dip into other classes like Warlock and stuff like that. My Warlock will out-heal. I put heal in quotation marks because it's not really heal. It's more help with healing, so shielding, stuff like that, through Dark Pact. But it will out-heal my Druid. My Druid very much has a couple of ways to deal with things. You can Frenzy Regen, you can Renewal, and you can Regrowth. Now, Regrowth is hitting for about 400k, okay, currently. I see abilities, and I see passive abilities that can do something very similar on, a better, essentially, non-GCD heavy rotation. What I mean by this is I have to sit there, and for two of these things, Frenzy Regen and Regrowth, sorry I haven't quite covered from last episode, but Frenzy Regen and Regrowth require me to use my global cooldowns. So for Frenzy Regen, I have to go into bear form and then press Frenzy Regen. Okay? That's two globals. Two globals where I'm doing 0 damage and I'm not getting any pressure out. For Regrowth, I have to cast it, so 0 damage going out, and I have the potential to be kicked, depending on my positioning and stuff like that. There's many different factors to this. Now, if I take a DK, for example, DKs are great at this. I played in a game where DKs, you know what, let's do this. DKs have a spell that is called Anti-Magic Shell. Okay, this anti-magic shell, what do you think it does? It negates magical damage. Yeah. It basically allows you to apply no dots, so no damage over time effects on the target whilst it is up, and it absorbs, we'll say 1 mil damage. Okay, 1 mil magical damage. Yeah, we'll say that. I'm pretty sure it's a lot more. I'm pretty sure it's like around the 2 to 3 mil range, but we'll say 1 mil. Now, he has this on a 1 minute cooldown off the global cooldown. Okay, so he has to press it. That's fine. I'm not worried about that one at all. If he has to press the button himself, then he can determine when to use this as a defensive cooldown. That's completely fine. I'm not against that. It's when he's summoning his horsemen that I get annoyed. Okay, so these horsemen all have different effects. One has a Chains of Ice, one has like a Death and Decay, I think. But one of them has an anti-magic shell, and when it is summoned, it will automatically put an anti-magic shell on. And the way that you summon your horseman is by doing damage. Okay? So you press your biggest cooldown, your offensive cooldown, and you'll get one of your best defensive cooldowns put on you for free at no extra cost. You know, you still have your anti-magic shell if you want it, like later on down the line if we manage to burst through that one, but you get one automatically. And the thing is, the horsemen have a very low cooldown. You have a chance to proc random horsemen whenever you do certain abilities, and if you keep procking this one back to back, you're going to get more anti-magic shells, okay? So this is a big defensive that you're constantly getting just by doing your damage. And that is what annoys me about passive damage and passive healing, because we were in a game yesterday against a DK, and we're a Mage Boomy. We're playing Mage Boomy, okay? So all magical damage, all caster. He pressed, in a 1 minute game, anti-magic shell 5 times. 5 times, okay? I cannot tell you how many times he actually pressed it. He might have pressed it first global, in which case he might have gotten 2, like, of his. But that's still 3 procs of anti-magic shell from a horseman, okay? He did, and our healers, bear in mind, let's say they did 100 to 120 million healing, okay? Yeah? These are our healers. He did 20 mil healing with his anti-magic shell AMZ. I think it came to about 14 million, like, healing done with his anti-magic shell alone. Like, how is that a fair thing to have when I, as a hybrid class and something that should be off healing, according to Blizzard, did, I think, around 2 mil healing? And that's even with like 4 regrowths in there. That's with like frenzy regen and stuff. But because DKs obviously have a healing absorb, my frenzy regen doesn't do as much, my regrowths don't do as much, you know. And then they were with a warrior. No, it was a devastation evoker. I don't know if devastation evokers have mortal strike. I don't know. But essentially I'm not as impactful because they're passively giving me a healing absorb. They're passively giving themselves a big defensive, which is against magical damage. You know, it's ridiculous. And the same goes with passive damage. Now, I know that there is a lot of passive damage in the game. Boomkin has some of it with shooting stars. So when my Moonfire and Sunfire do damage, it has a chance to proc a shooting star, dealing a little bit of damage, but giving me astral power. That's the main thing that I want it for. Now, I do 2% of my damage with that, okay? Warriors with something called Slayer's Take, okay? This is a Fury Warrior, by the way. It is doing 9% of their damage in a game yesterday. And all that he has to do is hit me. All he has to do is melee me, and it has a high chance to do so. How is that fair? How is any passive damage fair? Now, I get adding passive stuff to a class that has a lot of keybinds. So, Resto Shaman, for example, Enhancement Shamans, they have a lot of keybinds. But if you're giving passive damage to something that has about 2 buttons worth of a rotation, which is Rampage and Wrecking Blows or whatever it's called, how does that make sense? Okay, you should be filling out these classes a bit more with more buttons rather than just giving them more passive damage. If anyone gets more passive damage, it's the shamans because they have such a button bloat, it's unreal. Shamans, on the other hand, get Surging Totem, which replaces your Healing Rain, but it is another ability that you have to kind of press. Now, I get in PvE you are pressing Healing Rain a fair amount, but in PvP you never do, to some extent. So, it's ridiculous. All passive healing and damage needs to be looked at, in my opinion, and they need to be incorporated in other aspects of the class's kit. Okay? I gave Warlock as an example on Wednesday. I'm going to do it again. Afflock is very good because of its split in damage with everything. So Corruption will do a bit, Agony will do a bit, Unstable Affliction, Shadowbolt will do a bit. All of it has its part within the rotation and does a fair amount of damage. But Warriors, you look at Rampage, and it's just, oh, okay, well, he's just pressing Rampage. That's literally it. And then Slayer's Take is a passive proc, so he can't even control that. You look at Evokers, Disintegrate. Wow, what a rotation. Amazing. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? Now, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's just something that needs to be looked at, in my opinion, and needs to be changed, because that will get out of hand, these sort of passive damage increments, and I personally don't think it makes the game healthy because you can randomly get one shot and blown up. And it's not from skill, it's from procs, okay? It really is, and that's just the way that it is. It really is. Now, that being said, I know that kind of covered Wednesday as well, but I had to go over it again. I'm going to try a new little segment, and it's called Finding the Dumbass, okay? Now, what this segment is I go through the forums and find someone who clearly doesn't understand what is happening or what they're saying on the forums. They're not backing up their points, they're not doing anything that's constructive, or they're just making a stupid statement. But if you guys think that it is a decent statement and actually one that is correct, and then fair enough. But this is my personal opinion, and I genuinely think, like, that these things shouldn't need to be said on the forums, okay? Obviously, everyone will have their own opinions on this, but it is what it is. So, this person says, I'm sorry, but who in the nine hells has the time or patience to play this game for 6 hours a day, every single day? Clear every single type of content to barely get a piece of gear or the currencies to level them. You guys know what he's talking about yet? I'll carry on. Jesus, people, there's already enough challenge and difficulty in the content mechanics themselves. How is it fun to be stuck on this treadmill for weeks on end, possibly months, if you are a normal human being with normal playtime? Still don't know what he's on about? Well, let's see. Casual players won't clear all of the content, even geared to the teeth. Let people try to attempt and experience it at least. Any idea? Okay. Is he complaining about the content or the gearing? What do you guys think? He's not complaining about the content. He's complaining about gearing. This guy is complaining about gearing in the War Within. Okay. So, firstly, you can gear in the War Within. You can simply do a couple bountiful delves and you will get some gear from it. You'll get some Valor crests or whatever to upgrade your gear as well. You can do simple dungeons, heroics, mythic zeros now. Now, I get that some people might not have the time, but you can simply, even if you've got an hour to play, you can do a couple delves in that time. You can do a mythic dungeon or two. You know, you can do multiple things in the game within this time. And gearing has been so easy. I have a set of PvE gear and I haven't even tried, okay? Now, you can do the weekly quests that you get, which is you can do 6 world quests, you can do a dungeon, you can do a activity, and there's something else that it gives you. Now, this will give you a chest, and this chest will have a piece of gear in it. It's very simple. Now, people need to realise that, yes, you're not going to be geared, okay? As geared as people who might play it a little bit longer. But War Within has given people the chance to gear. They really, really have. They've given people the chance to gear and gear quite effectively. Again, go back to Shadowlands. You were in a shit show of gearing, especially for PvP, where you had to upgrade your gear. You had to reach certain marks to basically level up your gear and stuff. It wasn't great. So the War Within is immaculately better. Even going all the way back to Classic, if this person has not said about Classic gearing, then you have no right to say about the War Within gearing, because Classic gearing was tougher than it is now. All you had was to do dungeons, which were either very long or kind of tedious in some way, with a shit PC and awful dial-up internet back in 2004, 2005, 6, you know. So it took a while. It took time, effort, awful internet, and a PC that's viable, to say the least. But that's how you got gear. You did these dungeons, you did these raids, and they took a while. They took about an hour each, and then the raids took a few hours to several hours, depending on how good your raid was, you know. Obviously in Classic it took like 1 or 2 hours, if that, because everything had upgraded, internet-wise, PC-wise, etc. But, also we just had the information. But, yeah, if you've never complained about gearing in the past, Classic, TBC, Wrath, Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, Wall of the Draenor, Legion, BFA, Shadowlands, Dragonflight, if you've never complained in any of them expansions about gearing, then you can't complain now. Because gearing has always been somewhat tedious every now and again in an expansion. The War Within makes it so that there are totally so many more avenues in order to get these pieces of gear that you want, okay? You cannot say that it is horribly boring, because it's a very effective way of gearing. Delves, Mythic Plus, Heroics, PvP, open world content, okay, gives you decent enough gear to do, like, what is he complaining about? Like, the challenges and the content, yeah? It's absolutely ridiculous. He literally states that there's already enough challenge and difficulty in the content mechanics themselves that, I'm not going to lie to you, there isn't a lot of difficulty in the delves themselves. The delves difficulty comes from the overtuning that they had, okay? The mechanics themselves are very much dodge this, move away from that, and don't stand in fire. You know, it's not rocket science, okay? There's usually big swirly puddles on the floor that you don't want to stand in. Quite simple. So the mechanics came from the overtuning of the delves rather than the actual mobs themselves. I'm not going to lie to you. But that is the idiot for the day, or the week. I don't know which one. I'm still figuring out a name, but I'm going to go with that. So that is that. Please let me know what you think on it. It's so many people talk so much stuff on the forums, and a load of it is utter nonsense. It really, really is. And I get that some people might not have the time to play the game. But even the people who don't have as much time to play the game probably can see the fact that it is easier to gear than it ever has been in any sort of expansion. Classic, TBC, Wrath, any of them. Okay? All of that. So, yeah, we're going to try this segment constantly throughout the next coming weeks to see how it is, to try and debunk and demyth or destupidify the forums. I don't know. But obviously, that is my personal opinion on this matter. You might have a different one, in which case, fair enough. But yeah, that's what I'm going to try and do. So now I want to talk about the classic problem. The classic problem that I'm referring to is the War Within has been a big success over the past month. It has been a very good success, to be honest with you. And this has led to, in my opinion, classic Season of Discovery, classic era losing some of its player base. Now, the reason that I say this is my guild, who are primarily classic players, have opted to slowly play a lot more retail, which I think is very good. While, like, the War Within and that version of World of Warcraft is the OG WoW. It is original World of Warcraft. It's the original product, and this is just how it's evolved. Now, I'm glad that more people are getting into it. I get why people do play Classic and stuff. I completely understand that. People might just prefer the version. People might prefer the simple nature of it all, that kind of thing. But what does this mean for Classic? Now, in my opinion, Classic is going to halt quite quickly. People will experience the expansions like Mists of Pandaria when it comes out, Cataclysm currently, and the new raid, so Firelands comes out very soon, stuff like that. But in between, there's not a lot to do until you get to Mists of Pandaria or Warlords of Draenor or even Legion. You know, there's not a lot that you can do on the daily basis that can help you gear your character, enjoy the game, like in the game itself. Like professions become a bit more easier towards the end of them, and then once you've done your professions, you don't necessarily need to look at them anymore, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas professions in retail currently, you're constantly going to your little like your crafting order table and seeing if you can make some money from it. You know, there's multiple things that you can do with your professions in the retail version, and you can to some extent do it in Classic, but again, you need to advertise it, and you need to make sure that people are looking for these sort of the things that you're providing, whether it be a specific pattern or anything like that, but that might require a farm or a reputation needed to buy the pattern, etc. But I'm getting a little bit off topic. I don't think Classic is going to be sustainable if Blizzard keep releasing retail patches and expansions like the War Within for this past month. Okay? I genuinely think the Classic amount of players will deplete very substantially, and I think that they will have to merge the servers eventually. Okay? Now, Classic obviously doesn't have many people in comparison to retail, but Season of Discovery and Classic Era also don't have very many people as well. And this begs the question, do people from Season of Discovery and Era also switch over to retail? Now, don't get me wrong, Season of Discovery I enjoy so much. I think it's a great concept. I think that it's amazing, but I think you needed to launch Season of Discovery alongside Classic World of Warcraft. I think you needed to do that because Season of Discovery is very much Classic with a few spells added from other expansions. Now, there are obviously spells that haven't been added from other expansions and brought into the game like completely new, but I think that people just doing Classic like a few years ago, and some people who were doing hardcore Classic and, you know, Classic Era, they are bored of Classic, okay? Classic is very good. Don't get me wrong. It's a very unique selling point. It's very old, very nostalgic. But when you do 2019 Classic re-release, okay, and then TBC comes along, and then they open Classic Era servers, yeah, so people carry on playing that. And then they open hardcore servers, which is on a Classic realm. So again, you've got 3 increments of Classic, like World of Warcraft there. So when Season of Discovery comes out, which is a 4th Classic variation, okay, you kind of get bored of it. I'm not going to lie, some people really enjoy it. Fair play to them. But you can get bored of it because the only way to gear in Classic is via dungeons, which do take a while, and you've got to find the right people to play it with. And you can just be left high and dry if people really don't want to do the dungeons, stuff like that. Then you look at raiding at max level or PvP at max level to get your gear. Those are the 2 main ways of doing it, and that's kind of it. Once you do dungeons, you will eventually hit a brick wall where you cannot get any more better gear. It's one of them things. It's a bit shit, but Season of Discovery and Classic Era are really going to be hit like hard with if the War Within and subsequent expansions and patches come out that make the game this good at its current stage. That's all. It's going to be tough to keep them going. I would like to see them like be kept going, but I don't think it's a feasible thing, I'm not going to lie. Classic, I think you're always going to keep open because it allows people to experience the expansions that they want. I would like that they eventually do something where they can just pick an expansion and test it out. Now, that's going to be very tough because the very first problem that you're going to have is looking at a set player base, because if 10 people pick Wrath of the Lich King and only one person picks Warlords of Draenor, for example, the person doing Warlords of Draenor content can't do any dungeons because there's no other people on that server. So, yeah, you're always going to be running into a player problem there. Now, if you only had one World of Warcraft, it wouldn't be a problem at all because everyone's still on that World of Warcraft and the numbers will just be split across the expansions, not actual World of Warcraft clients themselves. But yeah, I don't know. I really hope Classic doesn't die because I want people to experience Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor, Legion. I want people who have never experienced these expansions to get the chance to, but it's not looking good with how good the release of retail is at the moment. It really, really isn't. But that is where I'll end it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. Do check out all of the socials down below. Constant stuff happening over there, as well as the Etsy shop down below. There's multiple things that are being added constantly on there, so please do check them out. All 3D printed stuff from World of Warcraft to D&D bits and bobs. It's really worth the look, and I would really appreciate it all if you just checked it out. But thank you all very much for listening, and go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.